Welcome back to another video. Today, I'll be taking you through what might have been my luckiest grind for a new hardest tower. It ended up taking me 7 hours, which doesn't sound that crazy, until you realize the last tower I beat took 29 hours, and before that, 94. But the weird part is, this grind almost never happened, because originally, I wasn't even planning to play this tower. I had my eyes set on a completely different one, Tower for Externalizing Insanity, and honestly, that didn't go well at all. I found myself stuck in a cycle of loop failing early on, never making it past the first 3 floors, and that's the worst part, because those aren't even the hard floors. So instead of feeling challenged, I just felt annoyed. My practice sessions started feeling boring, even the gameplay itself felt boring, and after a while, I just didn't feel motivated to play the tower. So I ended up stuck in this weird spot, not wanting to play THJE, but not fully sure what to switch to either. I was kind of just perplexed between grinds, until I found a tower of Fractured Memories. Tower of Fractured Memories is the last of the trio, alongside Inevitable Failure in Champions Road, and if you don't know, ToEI sits at the very peak of Extreme at around 9.95, and ToFM, that sits right at the very baseline of Terrifying at 10.0. That's literally a 0.05 difference, so technically, they're almost the same, but gameplay wise, completely different. ToEI sits in Ring 8 of the Great Inferno, while ToFM sits in Zone 7 of the Spatial System. 2 completely different locations, from 2 completely different eras of EToH. And there's something else. ToEI is a long tower, runs can average over 20 minutes, and ToFM just under 20. And I've realized, I'm not a fan of longer towers in general. There are exceptions, of course. But most of the time, longer runs just make the grind feel way heavier. It's not even just about the difficulty, it's about how the grind feels. Longer runs mean more time to lose, more pressure, more frustration. So between that and the fact that I finally wanted to be at a Terrifying, ToFM just made more sense. It felt like the perfect balance, still insanely difficult, but not something that would drain me before I even got close. And honestly, I just wanted a grind that felt doable. So I dropped ToEI and started grinding ToFM instead. Before I even started the actual grind, I did what I'd usually do for most towers. I all jumped it, just going through the entire tower just to see what I was up against. And honestly, a lot of the jumps confused me. Some sections didn't make sense at first, some felt really awkward. But I just kept going, trying to understand how everything worked. By the end of it all, I had only managed to all floor 1. So when day 1 actually started, getting to floor 2 wasn't too difficult. And around this time, both my friends Jason and Action showed me some strategies that actually helped a lot. One of them being upward momentum. Basically, you hold W, then jump off, and carry that movement into the next platform, either with A or D, left or right for the mobile players. It sounds simple, but it made a huge difference. It helped me build consistency on floor 2. From there on, I started pushing further. I didn't really know what to expect going into ToFM, but it didn't feel too bad. I was making quick progress, reaching floor 3 on day 2, and eventually floor 4 on day 3. And honestly, that gave me a lot of confidence early on. I thought to myself, maybe this wouldn't take that long. But at the same time, I knew I just couldn't rely on runs. So I spent a lot of time practicing, learning the jumps, figuring out strategies, just trying to build consistency early. I didn't just want to get lucky runs, I wanted to actually learn the tower, because I didn't want this to turn into another long grind. I wanted to get ahead of the difficulty early, instead of struggling later, like I usually do. And for a while, it actually felt like it was working. This is where things started getting real. I pushed past floor 4, reaching floor 5, and eventually achieving a PB at floor 6, and that felt like a big step. But after that, everything started slowing down, because I could tell this was the part of the tower where the difficulty spikes began. Instead of pushing for higher runs, I made a decision. I spent all of day 6 and majority of day 7 just practicing, grinding floor 7 all the way to the win pad, over and over. I wasn't even doing real runs at that point. I was just targeting specific parts of the tower and repeating them until they started to turn into muscle memory. And yeah, it was rough. Some sections just didn't feel consistent at all. There were moments where I'd repeat the same jump again and again, just trying to build up my consistency. But slowly, it started to work out. I was becoming more consistent in all my all-floor attempts. Not perfectly, but enough to where I felt like I actually had a chance. And after all that practice, I actually started to feel my motivation increase, like I could beat this soon. But at the same time, there was this pressure. Because I knew one bad run, one mistake, could drag this grind out way longer than I wanted. So even though I was ready, I was also a bit hesitant to even start full runs again. But then, I remembered something. It doesn't matter how much time it takes. It matters about how much you learn from the tower itself. After all that practice, I finally pushed again. Floor 7 was already the hardest part of the tower for me. It was the floor I struggled with the most, the one I couldn't consistently get past. What? Then, not long after, I got to floor 8, which ended up being the second hardest floor for me. And at that moment, I felt like I was getting back on track, like everything I'd practiced was finally paying off, like I was finally close. But then, everything just stopped. Bro, what the hell? Floors 7 and 8 were basically my choke points in the tower. I just couldn't get consistent at those floors, mostly floor 7. Day 11 was the worst day of the grind. No PB at all. Just consistent loop fails on the easier floors. The best I got that day was to the end of floor 7. And every run just ended the same way. Same mistakes, again and again. And it gets to a point where it's not even surprising anymore. It's just tiring. And it starts getting frustrating, because at that point, I knew I was capable of beating it. I just couldn't actually get past my own weak points. And then, the demotivation starts creeping in. Like maybe you're just not ready yet, but you've come so far. Why would you stop now? This happens in almost every grind. You see a rise, you hit your peak, then everything falls apart. But eventually, you break through. Day 12 didn't start any differently. I didn't know it at the time, but this would be the final day. I was still loop failing floors 7 and 8 for 10, maybe even 20 minutes. Same thing as before, nothing special. It honestly just felt like another attempt that would end in the same way. Then around 25 minutes in, I got past floor 8, and suddenly, I was on floor 9. Now many people see floor 9 as a break floor. A break before the finale. I was surprised, but I stayed calm. This is what I'd practiced for, and I fluked it. No practice run, no build up, it just happened. Straight to the final floor, floor 10, and that's when it hit me. This might actually be the run, and suddenly, everything felt different. Now, floor 10 has a system. There's a black hole underneath, covered by a safety net. I had 3 lives with the net, 1 without it, so basically 4 attempts. So there was some room for error, but not much. I lost my first life, and then my second, and at that point, it was getting scary. 1 mistake, and the net goes. And once that's gone, 1 attempt, and then it's over. And then, I fell. I should have lost my last life. But somehow, I didn't. I got insanely lucky and saved it, right at the start of floor 10. What a save! I still had the nets, and I could actually feel the pressure at that point. Everything depended on this one attempt, and from there on, I just locked in. No second guessing, no mistakes whatsoever, just pure focus, and I passed floor 10, reaching the final stretch. You see, the final stretch has the pendulum from TOIF and the optional trust flick, the last jump from TOCR, a nice way to finish off the trio. And somehow, I fluked it. First try, I beat ToFM that Sunday evening.
Come on. Alright. 3, 2, 1. Please. Oh my god! You're kidding! You're kidding! You're kidding! You're kidding! You're actually kidding! You're kidding. You're kidding. You're kidding. No, you're kidding. You're lying. That's another one in the bag.
And the craziest part? This whole grind only took me 7 hours. This felt completely different, but honestly, it just wasn't about the time it took. This was probably one of the most enjoyable grinds I've had. It never really felt impossible, just challenging enough to keep pushing. It felt fair, it felt rewarding, the gameplay was really solid, and it actually showed me how much I've improved, from struggling for days to pulling off a run just like that, fluking the final 2 floors. And I think that's what made this grind different. It actually felt like progress the entire way through. So yeah, that was Tower of Fractured Memories, and now, it's time to figure out what's next. I'm actually curious to see how far I can go.